I'll do it area by area, and I suppose that the thing to say is that the approach of the project was to have a set of complementary measures that were being taken within particular geographic areas. So there were some changes being made to the highway, there were some changes being made to green space and parks along the street. There were also changes to the shop front and historic buildings and the community projects. And what we wanted to do is try and tie those efforts together so that we could get change that would be robust and long-lasting. At this end of the street, one of the more, I suppose that one of the bigger changes that were made in the infrastructure took place. This is Braham Street, which is at the western end of the road, where there was a gyratory system. So this is a part of the gyratory that used to run around Whitechapel High Street and Braham Street. And this is Braham Street today, or this was Braham Street 2 years ago. It's matured a little since then. But the idea here was to rebalance the street network there. So we reintroduced two-way working on Whitechapel Road and turned this arm of the gyratory into a park. There was quite a lot of debate about the park and then what the nature of the park should be. Interestingly, the project was funded by private sector investment. The developer, Exemplar, who were developing a site adjacent to the street, recognised that actually the lettability and sellability of the units that they were going to build there, the offices that they were going to let there, would be better if there was a park next to it rather than a noisy street. And they actually put £4 million into this project that allowed for the street to be turned into a park, which is great, but we had a long debate with them about what the nature of the park should be. Edco Design actually designed the park, but if the first iterations of this design, it was a sunken plaza that connected with an underground shopping row of shops. What we managed to turn it into was something that we felt was more like a local park, more inclusive and more fitting for something that was on the edge of the city where there is a residential population, much poorer than the working population that work in the city. And this space now we think is more appropriate for that area. These are buildings just up the road from Braham Street Park, so close enough to make a difference in combination with the park. If you walk up the street from Braham Street, you come across this in about 20 yards. And this is them after work was done by Julian Harper, architects. One of the things that we found difficult, I think, during this project, and we've been working on since on other projects we're working on, is how to marry the historic conservation of these amazing buildings with something that's vibrant on the high street. We did actually team up, as the process went on, Julian Harrops were teamed up with a graphic designer, Objectif, to work on the shop signs so that we could make the shop signs relevant to modern day needs. Obviously it hadn't happened yet when this photo was taken. Across the road at Whitechapel Gallery, a small amount of money here bought us a high level of coverage. So I suppose the reason for putting this in, I suppose, is just in terms of talking about the process of delivery. It's partly about making sure that you're there and steering change where possible through this complex web of ownership and responsibility. But it's also partly, I suppose, about capturing opportunity when it comes along. And for us, this was an opportunity to give High Street 2012 a greater profile. This is a piece of work by Rachel Whiteread. It got a huge amount of coverage. We were able to badge it as High Street 2012 with a small amount of money. We were confident working with the Whitechapel Gallery that it was going to be high quality, so it was a relatively good, quick win for us. I suppose for me the most impressive bit of the work that's been done at Aldgate is the work that was done at Braham Street at Altobelly Park, which is just across the road from the Whitechapel Gallery and next to the historic buildings that we just saw. I suppose just to mention one of the things that we agreed with all the project partners at the beginning of the project to do was to procure separately design commissions for each of the 8 areas, if that was at all possible, if we had the control over the work. And the reason for doing that is we wanted to, get something that was suited to the character of the area, and we felt by having different design teams focusing on particular areas, we were more likely to get something like that. And also by splitting them up, it allowed smaller practices to be involved. And what actually happened was that there was a mixture of some larger and smaller practices joining up, and some smaller practices who were added on to the teams later on. So the architecture practices who worked on High Street 2012 were, I always get the combinations mixed up, so apologies to anybody here who knows what the combinations are and I get it wrong, but I think it was JMP working with Muff, Alan Baxter's with Easts, PRP and Adams and Sutherland, ACOM. I think that's. I'll add the extra names as we go along if I remember them. But that gives you a flavour that there are a number of design teams bringing a range of expertise so that we could get high quality, good design. Going back to Altobelly Park. The challenge at Altobelly Park was to try and redesign the space so that it was inclusive and that the history of the area was revealed in that redesign. It was a quite popular space, but it was popular with a small portion of the population, mostly young men, lots of young men who attend the language schools nearby. And the way that Muff approached that was to use the engagement process, the consultation process around the design, to engage with the local communities that were living there, so to engage in the diverse culture that there is around there now, but also to reveal the history of the area. This slide shows a street painting project that happened in the park, which involved Alpana street painting. The reason for doing that is that there's a memorial in the park, the Shihad Menhir, which is a memorial for language martyrs in what was East Pakistan, which reflects the Bengali community that lives there now. So we actually Muff worked with an artist from Bangladesh and with local people, and there's a language day on February the 19th, and they also were involved in that day. There was also an archaeological dig organised, which literally revealed the history of the site. It was the site where the original Whitechapel was, from Whitechapel, 4 different churches on the site. They organised a dig with the Museum of London and with local school children. They collected fragments from the dig, and they now are set in the park in these stone pieces, together with some interpretation boards looking at the history of the area, the history of the churches on the site, the Shihad Menhir and the Bangladeshi connection, and also looking at what happened in terms of Altobelly. The park is named after Altobelly, who was a young tailor who was murdered in 1981, I think. So it's named after him. So these interpretation boards were a literal interpretation of the history of the site, and Muff has further done playful things within the park that also reflect on that history of the area. So an incredibly diverse area, an incredibly complex history, but woven into the design through a real meaningful engagement with local people. And I think now that the park is more well used, it's better connected, it's actually more visible to the street. One of the interventions that Muff made as well was to put this raised walkway in, which actually follows the wall of the original Whitechapel. Quickly moving along. Somebody will have to tell me if I'm getting near my time or running out of time. 5 minutes. Okay, I'll try and go quite quickly then. At Whitechapel Market, we were looking at how we could make changes in this area, largely to try and accommodate the increase in use that would come through Crossrail coming and through the Royal London Hospital moving there. Again, in a very complex environment to work in. The market's very well established. People who've had stalls for generations. A lot of consultation happened. There was a vision for a tidied up market, for new, unified, consistent stalls. Didn't quite work out like that though. But actually I think this is an after picture, but I think it's a good after picture. I think actually what happened there, we went through a process of negotiation with all of the stakeholders, ended up with a plan where what we've provided in terms of the market is better lighting, better drainage, the stall holders have access to power, we've looked at the bins and the market management. And those changes are the kind of changes that were needed. It didn't need beautifying, it needed to be made efficient, and it made it possible for what was actually is a thriving market. There's something like 120 stalls there that are occupied nearly every day. So it wasn't something where we needed to really bolster it, but we just needed it to be able to work in a changing environment. And I think that's what's been achieved. And actually, although this looks like a bit of a mess, there is a reason why that bench is there. The bench is there is to actually stop the stalls spreading into that area. It provides a social space. There was quite a big argument about whether we should have benches there, but one of the arguments for putting them there was that there is a hospital just across the road, and there should be somewhere for people to sit. We didn't quite expect that they would be lying down, or indeed wedging themselves behind the arm of the chair, which is designed to stop people lying on it. At Whitechapel as well, there was a range of historic buildings where we worked with Julian Harper on a historic building conservation project. I've put these slides here just because one of the things that was interesting when we went through the process of analysing what was there was the incredible amount of decoration that there was on the buildings historically. I think the tendency when historic shopfront conversions or historic building enhancements are done is to strip all the layers away that have built up on the buildings and leave you with something a bit bare. And sadly, that's a little bit where we've gone, and I think that's something that we could learn in the future, is how can we look at those historical precedents and make, not strip away everything, leave some of the stuff that has accrued over time. That complexity again of the high street is something that makes it a great place to be in, and it's a shame to strip it away, even if it is to reveal some beautiful brickwork. I'll run through these because they demonstrate much the same things as I've been talking about. But again, at Mile End Waste, which is adjacent to Whitechapel Market, we looked at this area linked to the market. It's a green space with a 24-hour snack shop. It's also an area where the retail is re-emerging along that bit of the street, so we wanted to try and nurture that. So it's really a bit of recalibration, just looking at the historic highway layout and seeing how can we tweak that, how can we change it so it works a bit better for now. And in this case it was about shifting the parking to the other side of the road, putting a path in along one side of that green space and providing some routes through to the bus stop, again some seating, and across the road looking at the historic buildings. We're getting more successful as we move down the road, I think. These ones are a bit better in terms of the signage. I think the generous awnings are also something that adds a nice quality to the streetscape. Ocean Green is an estate a bit further down the street. Again, demonstrates that the quality of the street changes, and there are areas where they've obviously been affected by when the prevailing orthodoxy was that actually the streets weren't a good thing. They weren't a good social space. In fact, they were a bad thing, and that the residential units here don't engage with the streets. They turn their backs on it, or they're so the idea here was to look at how we could re-engage this estate with the streets. This was a quite complex, again, a complex set of stakeholders. We weren't at the start of the process, we joined it part way through. There was already this sketch drawing that had been prepared by, I think, Levitt Bernstein. There was a development agreement that Tower Hamlets had signed with East Thames Housing Group, who in turn had employed a contractor who had a design and build contract to carry out the works. And then we came along and said, how about running a design competition? So it was very difficult then to negotiate our way through that, but we did. East Thames eventually brought on board PRP architects, Adams and Sutherland's landscape architects worked alongside PRP, and we did come up with a strategy for re-engaging the blocks with the street so that there was some protection for the people living in the blocks from the street, but at the same time it reconnected with the street itself. And it's not... Okay. That's the wrong title. That should be Stratford High Street. So the other end of the street, the other condition that we talked about earlier, this 21st century High Street, I suppose remains the most challenging bit, and the bit that's most in flux, the bit that is least complete. It's interesting, actually this is still Ocean Green, isn't it? But this is maybe what we might see along Stratford High Street if I quickly flick through there. This is a towpath over the canal at Bow, which linked in with the strand of improving the links to green infrastructure along the street. Despite the fact that it's a heavily trafficked road, very close by there are great green spaces and incredible waterways, this one being one of them. Yes, the Stratford High Street, a different set of issues. It's along the same corridor, but very, very different in terms of the rate of change that's happening there. We work to introduce some creative energy into the design process there. So Minx Creative worked on this bridge thing, and Timorous Beasties on this design, which is now in the DLR station. But this is the most challenging area, as I say. There has been a nod to active uses being planned as part of the residential developments that have gone up, but quite a few of those not occupied. There is pressure now, which is starting to burst through in these finer grained interventions, but trying to nurture these and steer these and get better quality activities happening at street level is the challenge here along Stratford High Street. Very quickly, what kind of money's gone into High Street 2012? It's about 26 million if you look at the funding that was directly funneled through the steering group. What isn't on there is all the other money that's been spent along that corridor at the same time, including, for example, the cycle superhighway, which would be another £10 million. Doesn't include the private developments that have happened. I put these slides in just to say, why should the GLA be interested? But I think that what Matthew said earlier on probably already has made that argument. But just to say, obviously this bit of street is part of a route that runs all the way from Ilford to Uxbridge, 51 kilometres, 6,500 businesses, 79,000 jobs, and it's part of that amazing number of high street places that there are in London, 600 or 700, I think, depending on which way you measure it. And I suppose in part to respond to what Matthew said in his presentation, is this somewhere where we should be investing more? Well, we are a bit more than when we started the conversation about high streets. The Mayor, through the Outer London Fund and Mayor's Regeneration Fund, is investing around £100 million in about 28 different places. Quite a bit of it on looking at how we can reinvigorate these high street places and how we can build on the durability of them. Thank you.